Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we are going to continue our extremely early look into the 2019 and 2020 fantasy football season. Today we're going to look specifically at 5 wide receivers who I think, for various reasons, could rise up into that tier 1 ranking and possibly even further up on the list. I consider tier 1 being wide receivers 1 through 12, or number 1 wide receiver for each team in a 12-team league. I think these guys, even if they don't reach that, all will most likely exceed where they finished last year for various reasons, and I really like them as of late. I will mention, like in our previous tier videos, that these are extremely early rankings. We still have a draft, all the preseason and injuries, various other things, so we will keep that in mind. And the last name we had on the list was number 12, being Keenan Allen, and everybody who we talk about will fall in behind him. So today, first, I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with the number 15th ranked player from last year, Odell Beckham Jr. I know that obviously he's not going to be drafted around that range. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver or around there. But I really like Odell this year for various reasons, and I think that for the first time in his career, he has a very good chance of finishing as the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy football. I'm obviously a huge fan of his talent. I think he's a generational speed, hands, leaping ability to overcome that slight height disadvantage. Overall, just might be the best wide receiver in the NFL. Hitting his prime, no reason why, in terms of talent, he should not be the number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, his quarterback isn't that great right now, but we don't even know who it is right now. But they could draft Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins or another quarterback, start him right away in the first round, and he could beast up. Eli Manning, even if they brought him back, I still think he'd have a little more confidence with a healthy Odell, another year of Saquon, and they just started last year so poorly. I just think that Eli would go into this year being more comfortable, and he would get started and hot a little bit more early. They just got Pat Shurmur, who is an offensive-minded coach, should be able to open up a little bit more for Odell. I love Saquon, Ingram, Shepard. All these guys should provide him enough protection, but he should still be that 1A, 1B option with Saquon. And I just really love everything about him this year. Antonio Brown is 30, and he might be going to the Buffalo Bills, which would bring down his value a ton. I would not place him at number 1. Tyreek was the number 1 receiver last year, but that was sort of a blessed season. None of the other guys have done it before. Julio, TD discrepancy. I love Adams and Hopkins, but like I said, who knows? They've never done it before, so I think Odell is just as good talent-wise, if not better. Probably the best wide receiver in the league. And I think if you're going to buy into Odell Beckham Jr., this is the year to do it. And he should and could reach that wide receiver 1. I just really love everything about him. The division is questionable. Washington has no quarterback. Foles isn't there in Philly, and they're depending on an oft-injured Wentz. Dallas every single year is so inconsistent, you don't know what they're going to do. So any of those teams could win the division, I would say, besides Washington. And I just really love Odell. I'd buy into him and just have supreme confidence that he is going to have a massive season. Next guy I'm going to name on this list is Julian Edelman. He finished the season 22nd ranked. Last year, obviously missed those 4 games. Aside from that, averaged around 14 points a game, and if you extrapolate him out, he would have been a top 12 wide receiver. Not a high-profile rookie class for wide receivers, especially where the Patriots are picking. They're not going to have their first choice out of Metcalf, Neal, a bunch of those other top-end wide receivers. I don't think they'll pick a wide receiver in the first round. Because of that, there's not a lot of high-profile free agents, so I do predict that next year he will end up as the wide receiver 1 again for the New England Patriots. Gronk took a little step back last year, but him, I think he'll come back. James White, Sony should provide enough protection where you can't just do whatever you want with Edelman. I have a feeling everybody's going to make one more run at it, and I would not sleep it on him, and he has a high chance of being a tier 1 wide receiver, if not a high end 2. And I think a lot of people will be looking to not draft Julian Edelman for various age, Patriots fall off, yada yada reasons. So I would buy into Julian Edelman at that spot. The next name I'm going to mention on this list is Mike Williams, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. He finished last year as the wide receiver 24. So after everybody ranked wide receiver 12, there was only 3 players who ended the year with 10 touchdowns. And the other 2 being Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett for the Seattle Seahawks. And he did that on only 664 yards, which was the least amount from anyone who scored 10 touchdowns. And I definitely think the yardage total take a jump is one reason. He's age 24, extremely young, former first-round pick, extremely tall at 6'4", and this is his 3rd year in the league, and that's when wide receivers like to take that next jump. They've memorized the playbook, they're a lot more confident, and they usually take a step forward in year 3. Another huge reason I like him is he came on late, and a lot of the other skill position players are extremely frail on that team. Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry coming off a season-ending injury, Migos, a.k.a. Melvin Gordon. Who knows if any of those guys are going to stay healthy, and if any of them get hurt, I wouldn't really see it as it hurts Williams. I would see him as just somebody who's going to gain even more opportunity, and even if those guys stay healthy, I still think the offense will be clicking and he'll just get his. So I only see that as a good thing, and it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if it stays that way. So I definitely see him improving on the yardage totals, staying around 10 touchdowns, or even if he blows up, it wouldn't surprise me if he got more. And if that was the case, he would definitely be a top 12 wide receiver. So I definitely would consider him as a name. Probably not going to be a number 1 receiver, but it wouldn't shock me, and a little bit of an outside chance that he does. The next name I'm going to highlight here is Corey Davis. He finished the year as number 27. This obviously a little bit baked into Antonio Brown not being traded to Tennessee, which is one of the 3 teams he was rumored to being traded to. But assuming that doesn't happen, another year 3 wide receiver, very talented, tall at 6'2", age 24, number 1 wide receiver on his team. Everything's just trending up for him. And he only had 4 touchdowns last year. So once again, if we see another yardage uptick, he gets over 1,000 yards, gets over 4 touchdowns, he would definitely be above number 27. And if he has a massive year, sees a big uptick, he could definitely reach that top 12 mark. I would, once again, with Mike Williams and my next name, I wouldn't say it's likely, but it is possible and wouldn't shock me. I would predict him at around 1,000 yards and 6 and 7 touchdowns. I just don't see him having a worse year than last year in any metric. It would have to be an injury or a very surprising season. And I see him as being an extremely comfortable wide receiver 2 you've had on your team. Last year, I considered him more of a wide receiver 3 or a flex. You just busted out so many games. And this year, I just think he's going to take that step forward and be at least a reliable wide receiver 2 for any team. Last name I'm going to mention today, I really like this name, and it's DJ Moore, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. He finished the year number 38 last year. Last year's number 1 wide receiver for the Panthers. He's going to slot in as their number 1 wide receiver. Doesn't have Devin Funchess breathing down his neck or Kelvin Benjamin to look after anymore. Greg Olsen, I think his run is sort of done. And Ian Thomas is going to step into that number 1 tight end role. And it's sort of like all these other guys on the list where there's enough around him in McCaffrey, Ian Thomas, and Greg Olsen Curtis Samuels, Cam Newton running the ball to take pressure off of him. Like nobody's going to double him. So I think that he'll be able to do what he wants. He'll see an uptick for sure from where he was drafted. He only finished 2 TDs and 788 yards last year, 7 targets in 6 of his last 7 games. I see no way he obviously finishes as lower than 38. And if he builds on those 2 TDs, gets around 1,000 yards, 6 or 7 TDs, it wouldn't shock me, and put him in that wide receiver 2 range. And if he has a blow up, massive year, he could very unlikely probably hit that number 1 wide receiver or tier, but he could. And I really like him going forward for next year. He's going to be a name that I'm probably going to be getting on a lot of my teams, just because I could see him as being a low-end wide receiver 2, likely scenario, and be very happy with him as a flex. So that was 5 names who I really like going into next year at the wide receiver position, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you as always. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, maybe a tier followers video, Antonio Brown trade video, but we will talk then, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for listening.